We're here.
Hey.
Hello.
Yeah, everybody on Facebook land is watching.
Yes, all of them.
All of
Yay.
them. Nobody's watching right now.
We are so
If you look at
popular.
the little eyeballs over here. There's
Do eyeballs pop up?
yeah, they
Yeah.
do.
Mm,
It would be
okay.
really cool if it was like eyeballs.
That'd be a
right?
little
And
intimidating.
then it was like-
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, exactly. But it is kind of fun to just do a little bit of an intro here in the beginning, so we
Oh,
can
my
build
Lise
a
is
little
here.
bit of our audience. Oh, hi.
Hi, my Lise.
So we can do a little bit. I am your co-host. I'm Ken Conti. I am a beginner yogi. We'll
No.
Sure,
You've been practicing for years.
but I feel like
We're all beginners.
especially today. I felt like
Okay.
very much a beginner.
You're pretty hard
I
on
practiced
yourself.
next to Kyle. It was good. What does he do with his elbows?
He is just like double jointed.
Like when he does the breathing thing?
Yeah.
His
Oh,
arms are
yeah,
up
they go
there?
up high
Uh-huh.
up there.
Yeah, and he can do, you
I
saw him
can't
do
do
the
that.
shoulder
Yeah.
thing where it was like this weird, for those of you that can't see me, I'm doing something
Oh
ridiculous.
no, they can definitely see you doing that. And then our other co-host, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm
Jana?
Jana. I'm also a beginner yogi. Yeah, I'm Jana.
All right. And then you are.
I am Jack. I am a master yogi.
Woo!
No, I'm just kidding.
That's
I'm
what I
also a
like to
beginner
hear.
yogi. Yeah, Jack. I don't know what else I should
Well,
add to that introduction.
so
We'll
Jack,
get
yeah,
into it,
we'll
kinda.
introduce
Yeah,
you.
We'll get into
So
it a
for
little
now,
bit.
just Jack.
Yeah, we'll
Just
say-
Jack.
We'll just say just Jack. Jana, are there things going on at the studio? I feel like there maybe is a big event happening in October. Maybe I'm wrong. I
Oh
don't
shit, there's always something going on. If there's always something going on, which is why, my eyes are so tired. So yeah, we have the Hottober challenge happening in October, which is so exciting. We just had a ton of people sign up today,
Yay.
and I made Ken put his
Yeah.
name on the paper.
I was forced.
He said I was
Not
being he said I was
voluntary.
being aggressive.
Yeah, she was being very aggressive.
I'm
I was like,
rarely
yeah, I'll sign up. And then she's like, no, really, sign up now.
I'm rarely aggressive.
was
So Hottober, make sure you sign up. It's 20 hot classes in 30 days. And I mean, we put it together to inspire people and transform their practice. So it's designed to be a life-changing event. And we also have a cleanse happening in October, which is really awesome. And so if you really want to be a rock star, you can do 15 days of hot classes. You can pause for 10 days and do a cleanse, and then you can finish and do the
my
other
Lord.
5 hot classes at the end of the month.
What if you do the cleanse and the hot classes all at the same
I
time?
don't recommend it.
What's going to
Oh,
happen?
come
Having
on.
done the
Input.
cleanse, I don't recommend practicing hot within the first few days. So,
Really?
yeah, it's a challenge
Okay. All
in
right.
and of itself. So, yeah, we have that. And then we have a meditation workshop at the end of September, which is also awesome. 2.5 hours with Gwen.
That's great.
Yeah.
So speaking of Hottober, it's kind of weird. Is it Hocktober, or is it Hottober?
It's, see,
hot-
yeah,
is
how
that-
you did that.
Hot-
Hottober.
It's
Like you're breathing.
Hottober?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for my breath, by the way. As I go,
I don't smell it.
They
um,
can't smell it out
So, Jack, what do you find speaking of kind of 20 classes, what do you find the benefits of having a significant practice like that, where it's not just like, I'm going to go every now and then, maybe once or twice a week, but like having 20 days within 30 days, what are the kind of benefits that you see from that kind of practice?
Well, obviously, I mean, there's a lot of benefits. I think that for me personally, when I first started practicing yoga, I was going every single day and really, just being super intense with the practice. And then that's when I immediately began, after, a week or two, I began to saw a lot of results, and not just physically, but mentally. So, I think partly within the understanding, I've been talking a lot about in my classes lately, how yoga requires a sense of commitment and diligence.
For sure.
And you have to show up on your mat over and over and over again. And
Yep.
I think that people kind of have this expectation that, okay, I'll just go to yoga, once a week.
Mhm.
and I will, reap the benefits of the practice.
Mhm.
But
Reap the full benefits.
the full benefit.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, you'll get,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you are in there for that time, and you get that sense of, that space. But I think that, really the practice itself requires a lot of commitment. I mean, and even traditionally, like, the yogis were never not doing yoga.
Right.
You know, like it was a thing that was like your full life was committed to that
Mhm.
practice of yoga. And now, how yoga has kind of unfolded and manifested in today's world, you know we have to encounter yoga and also with our normal lives, and how we have to go to work, we have to be in our relationships, take care of our kids. I don't have kids yet. I want a little baby though.
Nice. Just that though.
Just a little
No,
baby.
not any older ones.
It never gets bigger.
I just want a
The
little baby
perpetual
that you
baby.
can, like, just put in the corner when you're done.
Yeah, that doesn't exist. That's called a doll. But okay.
But yeah, so I mean, that's my, if I get really nitty gritty for a second into this, in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says that there's two key elements. Well, there's a lot. He says there's a lot of key elements to having a successful yoga practice, but the two primary elements are consistent practice, so
Mhm.
consistent effort, and then non-attachment. So, like, you are totally dedicated to the practice. You show up, you do it diligently, and then you just let go of the results.
Oh,
You
okay.
let go of the
Huh.
expectation that you think you know what you need,
Yeah.
and you understand that this is kind of going on to another kind of expanding the topic, but
No, that's okay.
So would Patanjali approve of Hottober?
oh yeah, he signed up.
All right.
He
Patanjali's
signed up.
name is on the Hottober list.
Yeah, he's there.
All right.
Who's this
Cool.
character? I've never heard of them.
Oh,
Patanjali.
Yeah.
We're talking about Patanjali. So
Mhm.
Patanjali is a yogi sage
Okay.
from back in the day.
Okay. So he's
Um,
not around anymore.
no, way
he's
back.
not
He
around.
wrote the
Okay.
the sutras.
He wrote
Okay.
the Yoga Sutras, and the
Okay.
Yoga Sutras, I think, I don't know, I can't remember specifically how many sutras.
There's over 100, right?
Yeah, there's like 134.
Yeah,
Don't quote me on that.
that
But
sounds right. I bet it's
probably
right.
It came out of my mouth. So and they kind of they outline how a yogi should encounter the yoga practice.
Okay.
And the yoga practice not just being, asana,
Mhm.
but what yoga, the limbs of yoga, which we could go into that too. But there's tons of, it's like the entire the entirety of what yoga is.
Wow.
Basically,
I feel
something
like-
you should be reading.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
so. All
It's
right, I'm
pretty-
gonna have to get a hold of this because I kind of do like a little morning reading every morning.
Yeah,
Get it? Like
Yeah.
I'd be into.
it's heady. If you like some heady reading.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
pretty
I like
heady.
I like some heady
Yeah.
reading in the morning. It's a good way
Oh.
to start off the day.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to read, but I would definitely recommend. I'm trying to there's a lot of great authors who've kind of outlined what they've kind of talked about the Yoga Sutras and gave explanations, because if you just read the Yoga Sutras
Yeah.
without any like explanation, it's really a bit like it's difficult to understand. So
Okay.
you should always like start with
Get an interpretation.
An interpretation.
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
So let's introduce Jack, who just launched
Yeah.
on dropping knowledge bombs 3 seconds in.
That's all I got though.
Jack's full of knowledge. So Jack is somebody that we've known and the Fort Collins yoga community has known for quite a while. He has been teaching for longer than a lot of us. He was at Yoga Pod Fort Collins with us from the beginning and has since gallivanted off to many adventures and is now teaching in San Francisco almost full time, right?
Yep.
And living the big life, sharing yoga with all
Trying.
the people who deserve to have Jack. So we're sharing him with
Oh.
other people.
Well, I miss being at Yoga Pod Fort Collins. It will always be my home.
Jack is just the best. He is up for anything. my lease and I always made him do stupid shit like get on the counter and take pictures, and he'll do it. And
I did it. Yeah.
yeah, and just fantastic, incredibly knowledgeable about yoga in general, and has a really neat story also.
Awesome. Well, let's
So,
hear part of that story.
Yeah.
When did you start yoga?
Well, so I started yoga at I started going to yoga with my grandmother, who was actually in town in Fort Collins, and she always really enjoyed doing yoga.
Okay.
At the Fort Collins Club.
Oh,
or
that's
the
interesting.
then
That's
Fort
where I
Collins
actually.
Club.
Yeah, I
he
started
looked at
yoga
you
there.
also
really?
because you're older, Ken, so you might know. I'm just kidding.
Fort Collins Club still exists.
I know, I'm totally
well,
kidding.
well, the class we went to was a senior yoga class,
Oh,
or I mean,
okay.
it wasn't technically called a senior yoga class,
But they use like chairs.
well, no, there was not chairs, but it was like
Silver
inhale,
sneakers.
reach your hands, exhale, bring your hands down. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
yeah. Oh no, I
very-
went to some of those classes at the Fort Collins Club.
Mhm.
yeah, and they were great. I mean, they're
Mhm.
fun, great classes, you know,
Sure.
and they're really good if you know that's you know where you're at in your practice.
Yeah.
So I started practicing there, and I was like, and I went to a few classes, and I really enjoyed it.
How old were you?
I was like 13,
Whoa.
13, 12 or 13, maybe 12 around the Fort Collins Club time.
Mhm.
And then so I was taking piano lessons at the time, and I was like I also like I was kind of you know half-assing the piano lessons, like I
Sure.
never practiced. I would show up and the piano teacher would be like, so did you learn anything? I'd be like, no. So when it came to, I kind of decided I would like to you know dedicate my time to something else that I actually have a passion in.
Sure.
So I went to I saw then Breathe Yoga,
Okay.
which was changed to Elan Yoga.
Okay.
And I went to my first like class at a studio, at an actual yoga studio, which was Ashtanga yoga with a teacher named Dana Barclay, which if you've ever had the opportunity to take from her, she is an amazing teacher.
Cool.
Like I think you know that Dana is Brad's teacher.
Okay.
And I don't know, Dana's a lot of people's teachers here in Fort Collins, but I don't know if she teaches any longer in the city. But anyways, so I went to that, and I was like just overwhelmed, like looking around. I was like, wow, like these people are crazy, like they're ninja yogis.
Yeah.
Like people like jumping into handstands. Like I just thought it was amazing. So you know, and I was about 14 at 13, 14 at this time. I can't.
So pretty flexible still.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't actually a super flexible child
Yeah.
or a young person, to be honest. But so I immediately went out when my parents picked me up from yoga.
Mhm.
And I was like, you know what? Like, they were like, okay, you can either have a yoga membership or you can do these piano lessons.
They're
And I
like,
was like, okay,
"Uh."
peace out, piano.
Hey.
And so I started just practicing intensely. I had the yoga bug right away, and I started going to yoga like all the time.
So were you doing only Ashtanga? At
You
that
know,
point?
I was mainly doing Ashtanga. Like Ashtanga was really my love.
Your passion.
My
So
passion.
for those who don't know what Ashtanga is, Jack, can you give us like a 4-sentence
give us a lowdown.
description?
Yeah. So Ashtanga is kind of the mother yoga of Vinyasa yoga. It's a set series, and I think there's 6 or 7 set serieses. And usually, you know, you'll be practicing the primary series, which is the same, you know, group of postures, kind of chained along by chaturangas, by vinyasas. So when you jump back, go through your chaturanga, upward dog, downward dog, and then yeah, what was I saying? I was talking about Ashtanga. And yeah, so it's really the foremother of Vinyasa yoga, and it's quite an intense practice. Yeah, I don't know. There's
Yeah.
a lot of other things I could say about
Yeah,
it,
no,
but that
that's
was
good.
like
That's a
more
good-
than 4
Give
Yeah,
a
that's
good
a good-
description.
So yeah, I was intensely practicing Ashtanga, and Ashtanga is one of those practices that if you do it diligently, it will accelerate your physical like asana practice
Mhm.
quickly.
Yeah, Brad was just telling one of the teacher
Interesting.
trainees this morning. She was talking about how she wanted to get up for his 5:30 classes, but it was really tough. And he said, I mean, if you want to get strong, start coming to my Ashtanga
Mhm.
classes. And he's like, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm just telling you, like, if you want to elevate your practice, this is the way to do it.
Wow.
Well, and
Throwing down the
Ashtanga,
gauntlet.
He
Yeah.
did, and he
Yeah.
threw it down.
Yeah.
well, that's kind of how Ashtanga is traditionally, with the more traditional lineage-based yogas. So Ashtanga, Iyengar yoga, which were kind of the two like main lineages that popularized what yoga has kind of manifested into
Okay.
today. But they are both very disciplined practices, along with Bikram yoga.
Yeah.
They like you can't bring a water bottle into in a traditional Ashtanga style practice. You don't take a drink of water in the middle of
Mhm.
practice.
Hmm.
You don't like go to the bathroom because you need a pee. You hold your pee, and you like you continue to cultivate your internal furnace.
Hmm.
So I was like, if I kind of move back into the story of how I
Yep.
was
Sure,
getting
yeah.
into this, I was really, in high school and in junior high or middle school, I wasn't like necessarily also super happy in those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily get along with all of the people my age. So
And
yoga
was that here in Fort Collins?
in Fort Collins, yeah. So
Yeah.
I went to T.R. Paul Academy of Arts and Knowledge, which is
Wow, that sounds fancy.
Yeah.
it wasn't
that's-
that I mean, okay, it was a fine school, but
So why didn't you get along with your with
you know
your
I
peers?
just like I was kind of shy, believe it or not, I was shy. And I was just not super comfortable in my own skin. I didn't really, I don't know, it was just like my mind was in a different space. So yoga was instantly a place that I could just go, I would almost retreat to,
Sure.
and really dedicate myself fully. I got to meet, it wasn't just the yoga, but it was the community that
Sure.
I met there. And you know
You had a sense of belonging.
yeah, I definitely had a sense of belonging, and I think I naturally had kind of like I did really well at yoga.
Mhm.
I really got into the physical practice, and I also was super passionate about all the philosophy
Mhm.
and really all the aspects of what yoga kind of encounters people today. I
Mhm.
totally loved all of it, so I was just totally gung ho. And I started practicing like other styles. So I would go to some of the hot yoga classes. I would take, vinyasa. Um, and I
And
remember,
vinyasa is another name for flow, right?
Mhm.
Is that right?
yeah,
Breath
Yeah.
to movement.
breath to
Okay.
movement.
Okay.
Yep.
And sorry, I just like burped into the microphone.
It's all that Dunkin' Donuts
it
you ate.
is. It is. But yeah, so from there, I was just practicing a lot, and I I started going to different studios and started to get to know the community really well. And at that time, I was like just totally considered myself a yoga student. I didn't really, I just loved doing the yoga practice.
Did anybody in your family practice yoga?
Yeah, so my dad also would come to yoga. My dad, my grandma, and I would all go to
Oh,
the
right.
Fort Collins
Grandma.
Club together. But yeah, my dad would always come to. I would go to the more like beginners classes because that was really
Mhm.
where he was at in his practice.
Okay.
So we would do that together. But then my dad and I, this kind of leads to the next point, actually. My dad and I went up to a yoga journal conference in Estes Park. And now the yoga journal conference they no longer have them.
Right.
But they were really, really a special and amazing conference for yoga. So you would bring together all of the master teachers around the world. And they would have different conferences in different locations. So this one happened to be in Estes Park, and Estes Park was yoga journal conference was amazing. It's totally different vibe than like something like Wanderlust, which is a different
All these festivals.
Okay.
there's lots of festivals.
Okay.
Well, kind of like we were talking about, yoga's been so popular, like it's become so popular. So now there's
Sure.
all of these festivals and retreats and various things, but
yeah. So so we went up to this conference, and you'd basically take 3 workshops a day, each workshop, and you'd sign up with different master teachers, and each workshop was 2 hours long. So it'd be like a full day of yoga, and you get to meet other yogis, and study with these really amazing teachers. So I had been doing yoga now really intensely for about a year, and or maybe 2 years. I don't remember the exact time.
Okay.
And
So you're like end of junior high, beginning of high school.
yeah,
Just that
Okay.
really awkward
The really
time
Really
for a
awesome
young
time.
man.
yes, exactly.
Puberty, all those things.
Yeah.
Which I was hidden, which hit me. It's still continuing. Parts of it I'm still waiting for. But yeah. So I met a teacher there at the conference named Jason Crandall, who's a teacher based from out of San Francisco.
Okay.
And I took a few workshops from him, and I just really appreciated his approach. It was very alignment based, and I was already kind of getting nerdy into the alignment of the postures. Because
Jack is a true alignment nerd.
I love that's like what I really like to
Yes.
geek out on.
Hmm.
And he had a very just like pragmatic, practical approach that was also, skillful and integrated, yoga philosophy. Hopefully, maybe he'll listen to this and know.
Are you listening, Jason? I don't think he's on right now. Maybe later.
Maybe later. And so we were, after I took his workshop, I was like, this is great. So I went to lunch with my dad and some of the other yogis that were in the workshop, which was catered by Vegetarian Magazine.
Ooh.
So it was really nice.
Big timing.
And Jason just happened to be sitting at the table, like across from us, like alone. And Jason is a bit like introverted, so he's just sitting
So
there.
at the time, Jason, how big of a teacher is Jason? Is like explain to the audience what a big deal it is for you to see.
Jason has
Crandall.
at the time, which was like, what was this, like
Yeah. Tell me give me a time
9
frame.
or 10
10
years ago.
Okay.
10 years ago, Jason was, at that time a big teacher. He's definitely grown even bigger over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, if you were teaching at the Yoga Journal conference, like you had a presence in maybe like Yoga Journal magazine, which was
Is
like
respectable.
it's like
production.
that was like the voice of yoga. It's kind of changed over
So
time.
he's a big deal.
He's a big deal.
So you're eating lunch.
so I'm eating lunch.
He's eating lunch.
Yeah, and we're just sitting around, and I was telling my dad, I was like, I think that I would really like to do a teacher training, because it would be a great job for me to have. I would never have to.
And you're like 14 or 15 years old, right?
Yeah, I was like 14, late.
What most 14-year-olds are doing.
Oh,
at that point.
totally. Yeah. Hey, I want to be a yoga instructor.
Well, and I was very lucky to have very supportive parents.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Who are like, this could be a great way for Jack to, have a good job while he's, going through school, and, because you get to make your own hours, and, this is something he's really passionate about. And it wasn't just like something that I was like, whatever.
Go work
about,
at the gas station.
I was like,
yeah.
And yoga was something I was like gung ho about,
Yeah.
like I was going to do a teacher training, whether, they supported me or not, but obviously they did support me.
Yeah.
So I was talking about this, and Jason actually overheard us talking, and he was like, well, I'm doing a teacher training next or this coming summer in San Francisco. It's a month-long intensive, and I would really love to have you, So I was like, oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
That would be a really awesome opportunity. So we came home from the conference, and my parents and I talked about it, and my parents really made it happen for me.
That's cool.
How much does a training like that cost at that point?
This training was like $2,000.
Okay. What
Yeah.
does he charge for his trainings now?
Now his trainings are a bit more expensive. Now his trainings
Like 10 grand?
No, they're not quite that expensive.
Okay.
I don't know. Now he does modules, so you
Yeah.
you have to break up the payment. And but
So
yeah.
you went. So you
So
went and did
yeah,
this
so
training.
my mom and I actually went out to San Francisco for a month,
Oh, that's cool.
and we stayed with this like this random lady. That makes it sound weird, but
It
so
was like before Airbnb.
yeah, it was before Airbnb. So like what happened was we were like, Jason, do you have any ideas of where we could stay? And Jason went and talked to the studio owner, and the studio owner talked to like one of the students, and they found us an affordable place to live for a month.
That's cool. That's
Yeah, 'cause
the
it's
community.
Yeah, it's not cheap to live in San
No.
Francisco.
No, it's
Mm.
definitely not. So
So mom went. That's
yeah.
so cute.
Oh, it was so nice,
Yeah.
and my dad had, stay back and stay at work and everything, but they missed each other so much while my mom was in San Francisco. I was like, in yoga training, and my mom is like, she enjoyed her time walking around, but I think she wanted to be with my dad.
I mean, I'm sure.
Which is good.
Which is good.
Right?
Which is good.
So what was that experience like for you? That full month of submersing yourself in the practice?
Well, it was completely transformational for
Yeah.
me. I walked in on the first day, and I just had this like perspective that all of these people were like, these adults living in San Francisco, like educated, like super awesome, like their practices were really strong. And I was in this completely new studio, and this studio, it had been like it had a strong community of yogis. And in San Francisco, like it was a settled space, and I just like showed up and I remember like having a lot of questions the first day, but being too afraid to raise my hand. Like just always like, having these burning questions in my head. But, as time went on throughout that month, I was just like, I really enjoyed it. I totally got settled into it. I like felt super comfortable, and I really found my voice, because I was kind of saying earlier that I was shy, and that's the truth. I was definitely shy. And I mean, I attribute teaching yoga and as me finding my voice in a lot of ways, and coming out of the box. So,
what other transformations did you take away from that beyond just kind of finding your voice?
well, the thing is, in a yoga teacher training, and I was talking to some of the trainees last night who are in the Fort Collins Yoga Pod teacher training, and you get bombarded with information, and especially when you just have been taking like public yoga classes and maybe doing some other like workshops. You're like, oh, this will be fine. I know enough. And then you show up to one of these trainings, and you're like,
I don't know
shit.
Yeah. You're like, beginner.
Yeah, so
Beginner's
that's how
fine. Yeah.
I just like it was I was like inundated with information, and I was just like also like going through my own like who am I, like where am I, what's going on.
Sure.
Like kind of that experience. So but it was really really amazing. I mean, I learned that I didn't know a lot about yoga, which is like whenever you do a training, you kind of repeatedly
Yeah.
repeatedly, there it is, kind of re-understand that like yoga is such a vast base of knowledge, and like we are all just like we're just poking
skimming the
we're
surface,
just tickling it.
Yeah, it's very true. There's so much to learn. That's why it's a lifetime of
Yeah.
practice. And I mean, even somebody like Jack, who's done so many hours of training with master teachers, whatever that means, that's not even the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, definitely. So, I just felt overwhelmed in a lot of ways, but also like, eventually you come to this realization as a teacher and as a yogi, more as a yogi, because we're all teachers in our own way, that it's like it's okay that you won't ever know everything.
Oh yeah.
You're not gonna know everything, and you just like got to do your best and be diligent with the practice, coming back to that, and then let go of the fact that you will know everything. And just that is what yoga is about. So that's it took some time to come to that realization, especially after the first training. And I was like, and I was like 15, and I was like what's going on?
Well, and I can imagine at that age it would be really easy to become very arrogant and like, you know so much at that point because you're young, you're still figuring out ego and different things. And so fast forward, you finish the training and you come back to Fort Collins. And you're what, 15 at the time?
Actually, now I'm 16.
16.
So
Okay.
it's like so yeah, now I'm 16 and I just like jumped right into wanting to teach yoga. So um I went to a studio at the time that was called Monk Yoga. And that's how I don't.
That's a pre-podcast joke. You're not missing anything.
No.
I promise. But that's why we all laughed creepily at the name.
Yeah, so I started teaching at Monk Yoga, which was in Loveland, in the basement of like a building, and it was a really small studio, and it was but it was a great place to start out teaching.
Sure.
And to because to become a good teacher, you have to go out and teach, and you have to practice talking and teaching, even though it's really terrifying at the beginning. And then I went over to Old Town Yoga in Old Town Fort Collins. And I got in over there and started, subbing and teaching classes. And I think that people responded to me really well, although like I can say that the classes I taught back then were completely different than what I teach now, which is like a natural evolution.
Yeah.
And once you teach for a long time, then you'll kind of look back at and be like, oh my God, did I do that to them?
I mean, I even feel that way about the first class I taught when the studio opened versus now. And my niece and I were laughing about this too. She's like, oh, I think back and I'm just like so embarrassed of that first class, that first week, because you have to start teaching and then it changes after that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, how much can you do that in the mirror?
Right.
Right? I mean, you gotta, you gotta do it in front
there's
of a
so
live
many
audience
variables.
in order for it to,
Definitely.
It's
Yeah,
almost like
definitely.
stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
You have no idea whether it
is,
works
and it
unless
can
you're in front of
be,
people. Yeah.
We like a good joke in yoga.
And it's okay to like go through that process.
Yeah.
Everyone has to go through that process. So like you can't expect that you're gonna like know everything that you want to do so skillfully in the very beginning, you know. So it's like being a teacher is constantly evolving. Like even like my classes, like 2 weeks ago, I'm like still growing, which is a really important thing as a teacher. So,
and Jack has a really unique style of teaching. Ken, did you ever take one of his classes?
No.
I
I don't think so. I know we practiced together. I know
Yeah,
we've been in
yeah.
classes together, but I don't think
you're
I
a
ever took
you're a hottie.
I do
Ooh.
typically practice
Ooh.
hot yoga, but on occasion I will dip my toe in other.
He will when he's late to hot. He'll go to other
I'll go
classes.
I'll go to No, and Ashtanga has like it's very appealing to me because of that strength. piece.
Yeah.
And also there's stuff in there that I'm like, I definitely can't do that.
Right. And the
Which
set sequence.
Is really,
aspect.
which is like really appealing.
Well, that's
to
the
me.
thing. It's like, you practice it over and over again, and then
Until you
maybe
can
you
do
do it,
it.
maybe you can't do it. There's
Yeah.
only like one person in the world who does the like 6th or 7th series, because it's so physically insane, know.
Wow.
So, and in Ashtanga, like it's a staircase, like, and you have to take each step along the way. There's no skipping,
Right.
and that's not always how yoga is today,
Yeah.
No.
like yoga nowadays is kind of like, wait, for good and for bad reasons, it explores things in at an accelerated rate, or changes things up, but
Mhm.
there's a lot of value to repetition.
Well, and Jack's classes are, when you left Yoga Pod, now I know you said your teaching style has evolved even since you've been in San Francisco, but no music, which I think is different for a lot of people. Lights full on, there's no hiding in Jack's class. You're there to see what's happening, and very, very alignment based, incredibly challenging, very moderately to slow paced. With a lot of nice jokes kind of thrown in there.
It's a stand-up comedy show.
Yeah,
in
it's
my
a little
opinion.
bit of the Jack show, which is
All
great.
right. Wow,
Jack's
I'm sorry I
an
missed it.
amazing teacher. So you said now that your classes, your teaching has kind of evolved since you've been in San Francisco. Why do you think that is?
Well, partly because I'm realizing that, I've started to play music in some of my classes, not in all of my classes. Yeah, I know. I know. Well, when the whole world, like I said this yesterday at the studio, but when the whole world is like really demanding for music, it's a little bit difficult, not to
Mhm.
play music. But that's what I really appreciated about Yoga Pod. That was like,
You could do what
I
you
could do whatever the hell I wanted.
To an extent. I'm just
Huh.
kidding.
No, I'm joking. Yeah, to an extent, obviously. But and also I see music will never be the centerpiece of
Correct.
my class. It will. I will always keep it in the background.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be distracted by the music. Like if I hear some like rock star like singing in the background
Yeah.
to while I'm trying to like make a funny joke, it's
Yeah.
gonna the joke is I'm
The
gonna like
music
lose my
can't
train
get
of
in the
thought.
way of the jokes.
There's no Jay-Z.
There's no Jay-Z.
playing in your class.
Kyle played this song in class the other day, and because Kyle's the same, his music's kind of background noise, and it was first like some chanting and some oming, and then this rap song came on, and it was
What?
like intense, like, and he was like, "This is my 2-year-old's favorite song," and it was just so funny because his music's
That's
the
so
same.
great.
But so let's go back to the timeline. So you're teaching at Old Town Yoga. You're in high school.
I want to skip back actually,
Yeah,
just
skip
for a
back.
second, because you said something, and I just want to follow up on it, which was when you got to that initial teacher training, there were all these adults there, and you had this kind
Yeah.
of conception of who and what they were.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And as a 15, 16-year-old or whatever, you're like looking up to all these people. But I imagine at some point you realize, like, oh, I'm just like them.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely. Yeah,
Right? Like you had this moment of like, oh, we're all just kind of yogis here.
I did definitely have that realization. Like, and I mean, it was obviously later in the training when
Yeah.
and it's I want to be. I kind of wanted to be modest and everything, and not be
Yeah.
like at the beginning like, oh, I'm the same as all of these.
Yeah,
adults.
no, I get it,
But,
yeah.
eventually, especially at a 200-hour training when you're going into that training and it's like everyone feels like almost like a newborn baby.
Yeah.
So they, after talking with them too, it's like they were looking around at all of us,
Yeah.
and
Like, look at this
including me.
15-year-old.
Yeah,
yeah,
What?
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, this kid came to it so young. I wish I had,
Yeah.
started
Yeah.
that young and did it. Yeah, I could totally see that
Exactly.
as well.
Yeah. So they would look at me and they'd be like, wow, he like has a real talent for this kind of
Mhm.
stuff, So it was funny, looking back at it, that we all had those conceptions of each
Mhm.
Yeah.
other.
For sure. Yeah.
Well,
So-
we had a 15-year-old in our training. My Lisa and I did.
Oh, nice.
And Audrey, Audrey.
Yeah,
And
I know Audrey.
she's amazing. And she was also graduating high school at the time.
At
And
15.
At 15. She's now in her second year at Harvard. And she's 17 or 18.
Yeah, she's
What?
amazing.
And we all
Wow.
felt that way about her. Like, I mean, Audrey's so much more mature than I was at 34. And so I imagine they were looking at you thinking the same thing. But while you were describing that, I was sitting here thinking, I wonder what it would be like to be 16 and not have the obligations of like spouse and kids
Mm.
and all these things that interfere with my yoga practice, and just to be able to practice yoga whenever I wanted. What a freeing thing.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think it was interesting because a lot of in a teacher training, a lot of the conversation, when you're talking about like dharma and philosophy and kind of like the other aspects of yoga that aren't just the asana, the poses, but you have a lot of conversations in a yoga teacher training, and it can often be kind of emotional. People like, I have never taken a training where someone hasn't cried.
I could see that.
Yeah,
So-
totally.
Yeah, so and then the conversations that I had, like, I kind of didn't relate in some ways because a
Mhm.
lot of conversations were like, about relationships or kids or something,
Adult problems.
adult
Yeah,
issues.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say
Mhm.
that I wasn't going through things, like,
What were you going through at the time?
well, for me, I was like, even before this training, I was like holding in the fact that I was, gay,
Mm.
and I wasn't out to anyone,
Anyone.
not
Nobody.
my mom, not my dad, not like
It was
anyone.
just bouncing around your head.
Yeah, I was bouncing around my head, and obviously I was in San Francisco, and there was like 40 gay men in my training.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
So you're like, oh no, I'm not gay.
Yeah,
Nope,
I'm
Not
like,
me.
that's
So-
really good for you. I'm happy you're happy.
How long had you been dealing with that idea bouncing around in your head?
Well, I mean, I kind of I didn't really know how to conceptualize it, but since a very young age,
Okay.
there were the signs.
Yeah.
I was playing with Barbies, but so and then as I got older, I started to have that realization, and it's not like I was ever, my parents were like, they wanted me to be gay,
Okay. Hold on.
Wait a minute.
Your parents wanted you to be gay.
Well,
Why do you say that?
Well, that's just to say that there was no the viewers are going up now.
We just tripled our viewers.
That's not to say like that's just to say that they were very open and accepting, and there was no like, oh, if you're gay, that's going to be an issue,
Yeah.
it would have been celebrated.
There's no disappointment or
As
any
none of it,
As
my
there
parents are
shouldn't
like,
be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
shouldn't be.
so which is really wonderful. I mean, that's not to say like that was my only, when you grow up in Fort Collins and you go to school, that's not all of what the world is like, no, Fort Collins has some, it isn't a completely accepting community in that light.
Mhm.
So, I was kind of having that impression in my head and everything. And I just remember being in San Francisco, like, not, we're talking about like coming into your authentic self and like
Sure.
and coming to these realizations. And I was holding this big part of me in, so it wasn't actually until I got home from the training and like until maybe like a year or two later, and I've
2 years.
yeah,
You
or
held
something
it
like
in.
that. Yeah.
Wow.
And I was like, I had to like fully, come into that space in myself, and this is like how training goes. Like people think, it's like normal, like a normal school. And normal school isn't like this either, but that you go to school, you get your like diploma, and now you know everything.
Mhm.
It's like it's not
Yeah.
like being a yoga teacher is not ever going to be like that.
Yeah.
No.
it's
Kind of
like
like
a
being a yoga
process.
student is
Yes.
never going to be like that
Correct.
either, because
Yeah.
you go in there and you're always like there's always something to learn.
You're
There's-
always transforming.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Jack, when you were kind of throwing this idea around in your head, did you feel like that coming out and kind of embracing that as who you are, it was like that step you needed to take to actually live your yoga, to be,
Yeah.
true to yourself?
Oh, certainly. And it's funny because like I taught yoga and I was like preaching all of these things in my classes. And, there's also for all of us, there's still parts of like, kind of coming into our authentic selves.
Mhm.
But in yoga class, I'm saying all this like stuff. But like it's hard to fully embody that practice.
Mhm.
And like when you are sitting in front of a room of people and, and you're like saying all of these things, you have to
You feel like a
hear
poser.
it. You feel like a poser, and eventually like you have to, and it really pushed me into
Yes.
that. That is one of the things that yoga helped me embody myself. And then like saying that I was gay, like it was not an issue. It was like,
Yeah.
I'm really lucky I surround myself with people who like don't really care, so it's not, but like even now, like I'll get a rainbow flag and like prance down the middle of wherever, like Texas, or I don't know, maybe some places in Texas.
Maybe.
But like I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like like yoga helped me come into this complete acceptance of myself.
Yeah.
And now I don't really care, but that took a while.
It
Yeah.
does. And I think with everybody who, like you said, is diligent with the practice, eventually you find these things in your life where you're like, this isn't, I'm not being authentic. I'm not being real when I'm in the studio if I'm not actually embracing this fact. Like for me, it was going vegan. Like 2 years ago, I just no longer felt like I could live my yoga and eat animals. So,
Yeah, certainly.
a similar concept. It's different for everybody. And I don't know, Ken, what do you think?
So let me understand this. So going vegan is like coming out. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
The liberal
a
agenda.
little bit
I'm
when
just
you're
kidding. I'm totally
when you're
kidding.
raised in a family that hunts
Yeah.
and eats meat. And
Yeah.
I mean, I remember telling my dad at a young age that I didn't want to eat meat. And he was like, oh, I mean, my dad's the gentlest human, but he was
Yeah.
like, oh, you're going to
Don't
eat
be
meat.
silly.
Like,
Yeah.
you'll eat meat.
Mhm.
And so I ate meat, but I never really wanted to. That
Mhm.
was the whole
Yeah.
thing. So later for me to make that decision, and it's like no big deal now, right? I mean,
Mhm.
whatever. But at the time, it seemed like such a big overhaul. I even remember like telling Ben, my husband, who's a chef,
Yeah.
that I was no longer going to eat not only meat, but any animal product. And he was like, oh, shit, are you
You just made my job so much harder.
He was like, are you kidding? And I'm like, no. And he's like, all right, fine, we'll figure it out. But so
Yeah.
now we have like 4 different diets going in the home. But
Mm.
yeah, a little like coming up. Not to discount your story.
No, no,
Jack.
no.
Jack's got this big deal, and I'm talking
Yeah.
about food as usual.
That's kind of a big deal. No, that's interesting. I haven't. I mean, if we're talking about food, I'll talk about it just because. So when I was 15, I think I stopped eating meat, and I only ate fish on occasion
Mhm.
until I was 40, I think,
That's a long time.
and then I started hunting.
Oh wow.
Weird, right?
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. And started eating meat. Bacon is the gateway drug.
That's the
and
one meat I
had-
That's how I
miss.
Yeah.
went back
actually.
to being a meat eater.
Yeah, and so now I guess I kind of embrace the idea of being responsible,
Yeah.
and or at least trying to be responsible about it. And for me, I like physically just feel better
Yeah.
now.
Right, which we've
and-
talked about.
Yeah, which and I think it just really depends on people and where they're at. But I still eat a ton
Well,
of plant.
Yeah, and I imagine hunting's a very spiritual experience for
Yeah,
you.
it's not. Yeah, it's not. I haven't been particularly successful, but it's a very different experience, I think, than what most people think about or
Right.
see on
Mhm.
TV.
Mhm.
I'm not like in a helicopter, like
Syrup
shooting
bowl.
pigs with
Oh.
Ted Nugent, like going woo.
It's a whole other episode.
Jumping
It's
out
a
of
little,
trees.
yeah, it's a little different than that. And so, but yeah, but for me, the kind of authentic yoga part
Mm.
of it, if we come back to that, is just the fact of trying to stay on my mat. Like that
Mhm.
is the piece that's been, it's really easy for my mind to go somewhere else, right? It's
Mhm.
really easy for me to check out, think about my list, my kids, my wife, my whatever, the 50 things that I've got going on. And so for me, that like being able to take that moment, and really be in that moment is really difficult for me. And so that's been my kind of journey through this whole,
Mhm.
this whole thing.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think one of the major lessons that most people intuitively take off the mat into their lives is cultivating the seat of the observer. And this is how,
Mhm.
all of us have came, essentially, maybe not directly through yoga, although it is like being aware is yoga, like it's pretty open-ended, is coming to being super present with yourself on a physical, mental, emotional level, not, just mindlessly moving through life.
Mhm.
yeah.
And when you do that, you're kind of forced to look at yourself under a microscope,
Yeah.
Yep.
and then you get to make really skillful, intentional decisions about how you want to cultivate yourself,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and that's what you do in yoga on the mat. And that's what I'll always say in my classes is like, it's not about the pose, it's about using the pose as a tool to acknowledge your experience. Yoga gives multiple tools to help you be present, and then all of these sensations that come up in your experience are just touchstones for you to cultivate being an observer,
Mhm.
and then being skillful. And that's what being a yogi is, So that's what led me to, not just doing yoga, but teaching yoga, to have this realization, like, I have to live my life in a fully embodied way.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I can't like hide the fact that I'm gay, like
Mhm.
this is what it is.
Yeah.
So you told your parents when you were about 17 or 18.
Mm-hmm.
And how old are you now, Jack?
Now I'm 24.
Okay.
So
So what has that been like for you now, navigating as an adult male gay
Well,
yoga teacher?
That's gonna
That's
be
all
on my
you
resume.
are.
Adult male gay yoga teacher. Well, actually, I just have to say a funny story that when I came out, I told my parents they took me out to dinner and they gave me this little statue of this like young boy standing in front of a tree with his arms open, and it says your whole life is like before you or something, like your whole life is unfolding from this moment. So it was really,
So
it was a really
cute.
wonderful experience. So now
Aw.
navigating that space, I still just do things my own way,
Yeah, you do.
especially now that I'm living in San Francisco. It's a bit of a different experience. Because it's not like weird. It's like, if you see straight people holding hands in San Francisco, you're like, oh, I'm so happy that they are so proud and they feel so accepted. um so no, I'm joking. That's not true. I mean, in some places in San Francisco it actually is true, but it's still like coming into it, but now it's not like a huge part of my identity.
Yeah,
it's like I would
right.
even consider the yoga teacher a part of my identity, is like much bigger.
Of course. Definitely.
And it's so it's kind of funny how like it's not in the forefront of my mind. That was an obstacle. That was something that I was working through then, and it's not necessarily what I'm facing now. It's just like when you are diligent, when you do the practice, like and you let go of the results, that you yoga gives you what you need. And when I say yoga, I'm not speaking to just coming to like yoga classes.
Right.
I'm talking about the practice of being aware, being mindful, being intentional.
So what does your personal practice off the mat look like?
Well, I end up well, now with the modern age of Instagram. No, I'm joking. I so my personal practice looks like I just like roll around on the floor and try to stick my leg behind my head. Like, I'm not even joking. That's sometimes what it is. No, but I like to practice and just kind of play around. But I also enjoy going to yoga classes and learning, especially it's a different experience as a yoga teacher though. So because you're always like listening to the other teachers' cues, not like you're analyzing their class whether it's good or bad. You're just like, what can I take?
Yep.
What can I put in my like arsenal of cues?
Yeah.
Which is, sometimes you have to turn that part of your brain off and just take the yoga class.
Yeah.
And just do the yoga.
Yeah.
But it's now just moving to San Francisco. I mean, there's a lot of different styles of yoga, lots of different teachers. So lately I've just been going to a lot of different classes.
To everything. And what's your spiritual practice like? What do you do, for daily ritual or,
Well, this is actually like one of the most essential parts of what yoga has given me, and it's been a very my spiritual practice is, it feels very intuitive. I don't like have I can't really like conceptualize it in a lot of ways, but I feel like I am able to be less reactive. I'm like, so when I'm moving through my day, I am able to look at like a larger perspective of things. Like, back in the day, like some things would have, in my life would have really upset me, or like thrown off my day. And now I can kind of slow down, take a deep breath, look at it from a larger perspective. So and that seems like just like a healthy way to be as a human.
Sure.
But that's like my
So
spiritual
hard.
practice.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
What about you, Ken? What do you do daily to kind of keep your yoga off the mat?
I think for me, like starting my day off is a huge piece of it. And so I do some reading in the morning, and I try to do some meditation. It doesn't happen every day. And then at the end of the day, I try to kind of take stock in what happened that day, and really kind of just turn that over so I can actually go to bed with like a clear conscience, and not have to like replay everything that happened. And then I've also got some really great people in my life that when things are hard, because life happens,
Mhm.
I can actually go to them and talk to them about it. And they have, a practice that will, encourage that and encourage me. And so what I found yoga helps me do is be able to, like you said, be more present, and not be as reactive, not have,
Mhm.
my tendency is to be like the world is ending. Like that is whatever it might be.
Yeah,
Like
same.
if we don't have, if I don't have coffee for the morning, like
Yeah.
what?
Chicken with
Like
your head
how
cut
did
off.
that happen? Or whatever it may be, my wife doesn't have her phone on and I'm like, what? How can I
Mhm.
not get a hold? It's like, okay, let's take this
Take
for
a
what it
step
It's a
back.
really
hard
is.
practice, though.
Yeah.
It
That is like the
is.
most difficult thing
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
take a
For
step
sure.
back, especially when you're heated or like totally in the
Mhm.
moment of that. It's like that's that's super hard to step back and be like, okay, like look at this.
Yeah, and there's so much value in removing yourself from a situation as a participant or a victim, or you're in it so deep that you can't see the rest of the big picture. And that's I mean, you hit the nail on the head. For me especially, one of the most essential parts of my practice is being able to be an observer.
Mm.
That's
Mhm.
huge.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'm still learning, obviously.
Well, and I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, like, that's everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everybody goes through that. And I think that's when, that loneliness, that darkness, depression, however you want to put it, you get to
Mhm.
this point where you're like, oh, nobody knows what I'm feeling. And that
Mm.
is
Yeah.
such
Mhm.
BS.
It
Like, I mean, we can
is.
all believe that, at
Right.
times where it's like, oh, I'm so whatever. But it's not, it's part of being human.
Yeah.
Mm.
Right. And so how do you deal with being human? And for me, yoga is a piece of that,
Mhm.
Yeah.
of like, okay, how do I be a good human being? Because to me, I'm like, oh, Jack is this like spiritual being. He never goes through any of those things, right?
No.
No, but I mean that's
Not at
that's
all.
what we as people, and so I think that's what's refreshing about a lot of these conversations is that we have these conversations with people that we look up to, or
Mhm.
that maybe other practitioners look up to, or we take classes from, and we get to learn that they're people going through this human experience just like us, right?
Right.
And they might
Yeah.
have more tools than us, and they might have this and that, and they might be able to put their foot behind their head, but guess what, they still,
Mhm.
like, they're still going through that same process.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Well, one of the things that we did in my training and this was kind of a big turning point for me, is we all went around and said just like one word of the way we felt when we came to our first yoga class. And like
Mm.
most people were like terrified, like what the hell, some people were like excited, and we all looked at those people like, okay,
Yeah,
Sure.
you're
sure.
lying.
But like, and then I was looking at all these people that when I first went to the training and I saw them, I was like, oh wow, they are so cool, so knowledgeable, then they're just like me,
Mhm.
yeah.
and I mean, I even think that happens with when you look at like some of these like super larger teachers, teachers
Mhm.
who have garnished a big following. They even, are questioning themselves,
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that if that ever goes away, like that would be
Mhm.
amazing, but I don't think it ever does.
I don't know. Beware. I think, like if it actually
Yeah.
goes away, like it's
Well,
one
then
of
you're
those things.
done learning,
Yeah.
right?
And, you talk to a lot of people that are in, important positions or whatever, and they're like, oh, when am I going to get found out that I don't know
Mhm.
what I'm doing, or whatever,
Mm.
Right.
whatever it
Mm.
may be, whether you're
Exactly.
like the head of a company or you're, a celebrity, or you're whatever. Like that's such a
Mhm.
common, like, feeling of kind of insecurity. So,
That is
Yes.
that for a yoga teacher too. It's like you
Yeah.
have a lot of students who are like, wow, like this person knows everything
Oh
about
yeah.
yoga. They are
gosh.
my new spiritual teacher. And that was really weird for me as like a 17-year-old to have people come into my classes and be like, you when you give so much respect to your yoga teacher, but then
Yeah.
I'm sitting here like feeling like the Wizard of Oz. like, yeah, sure, but that it comes to a certain point, even after my most recent training, where
Which was, tell us, you
well,
did the 300 hour.
so yeah, I did a 300 hour with the
with
same
Jason.
teacher, Jason, again in San Francisco. And you have this expectation, okay, now I have a 300-hour training, like now I'll know everything. But then it's like you don't, you realize, oh my God, there's so much more to learn.
Yeah.
And then you come to the realization that it's okay, like, I have something to offer. And this is what yoga teachers, wherever, if you've been practicing for like, it's your first class, you've been practicing for 20 years or teaching for 20 years rather, you have to come to a point where you are able to just understand that you have something to present to these people that's really meaningful and purposeful, and they need that, and you don't have to be like, a PhD in anatomy and like religious studies and like,
right.
Like read Patanjali's Yoga Sutras 84 times or 108 times. That's a more appropriate
Yeah,
number.
there you go. And know what 108 is significant for.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Do you know?
I don't know what 100
It's a very
is.
auspicious number
Yes.
in
Okay.
Hindu.
Something
religion.
to do with like 108 meridians in the body and energy channels and
Yeah, I never really knew why it was auspicious. I was just like, okay, someone told me that, so like,
Yeah.
okay.
That's why
yeah.
the Yoga Pod membership is $108.
Is it?
Not 109. You
Wow,
guys.
and that's why there's 108 little beads on a mala.
Beads on the mala.
Because of-
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You
Wow.
move
I'm
your
gonna
fingers
okay.
through
There's
it.
a couple things I'm gonna have to look up after this. After this.
It's true though.
session.
Nothing's harder than that first being a new baby teacher, because you
Mhm.
do. You feel like such a poser. But you just have to dive in and do it and trust, like Jack said, that you have something to share, whatever that may
Mhm.
be. It may not be a wealth of knowledge of all things yoga philosophy, but you have something to share. Maybe that's just an energy or kindness or compassion or whatever you may be providing for your students, but it's there and then you build as you go.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and so I guess one of the things that is somewhat interesting about that as well is that when you take a look at those ideas, you realize that everybody comes away with something different, right? When you're a
Mhm.
teacher,
Yeah.
you can't like force that experience on them, right? All you
Right.
can do is like present it, and then everybody walks away with something different, right?
Yeah. I'll teach a class and I'll be like, I'm going to really focus on this certain thing today.
Sure.
And hopefully everyone gets this, and then and then after the class, I'll have people come up to me like, I really loved how I got this from your class. And it was something totally, completely different.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay,
right.
well, I'm glad, and this kind of reminds me, this is slightly different, but some of the best advice I got from Jason, was that sometimes you'll teach what you think is the best yoga class. You'll be like, wow, I am the next Shiva Ray.
Yeah.
Like, watch out,
The next
yoga
Rodney
world.
Yee.
Watch out, Rodney Yee. Like, chop your ponytail off. I'm coming for you. And then people like leave your class like, oh my God. And then there'll be other times
And then it's the opposite.
where you'll be like,
yeah.
like you'll teach your class and you'll be like, what the hell
Worst
did I
class
just
ever.
do to those people?
Yeah.
And people will come up to you and be like, oh my
You
God,
saved my life.
like your words just changed my life,
Mhm.
and I love how you do this, and I
Yeah.
love how you do this. So
It's crazy.
So here's a question. We're a little bit over an hour, but
Mwah.
we'll go through. Yeah, we'll finish this up. So how do you internalize that? Like, how do you internalize those comments when somebody comes to you and is like, oh my God, that totally changed my life? As a teacher, like, do you just, like you were talking about, do you just kind of observe that and go, okay, that's a great opinion? Or you actually like take that in, or do you just blow it off and you're like, nah,
Well,
whatever?
this is one of the hardest things about being a yoga teacher,
Mhm.
because like you get so wrapped up in the beginning, and like hopefully you begin to kind of move through it, but in what people think about your class. Do people like,
Sure.
you'll go to bed at night like thinking, do people like my class?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Am I a good yoga teacher?
Or you'll go to bed and you'll be like, oh God, I forgot to do all of that on the other side. You know,
Yeah,
you like think
exactly.
about
Yeah.
it, and then you're like, oh, what an
Oh,
idiot.
yeah, exactly. You know, and it's or like when people will come and be like, you know, I really got a lot from what you said, and you'll be like, and it's really also easy to be like,
Ego.
you know, to be like, oh my god, you're right, I am
Yeah.
brilliant. I have a, you know, and that, so you have to keep that in check, because you cannot be on that roller coaster, you know,
Mm-mm,
as a yoga teacher.
no.
And in the beginning, when you first start teaching, it's really hard. That's like, I would say, one of the most
The hardest.
the hardest
Yeah.
The
obstacles.
hardest. It's the hardest thing I faced at the studio
Yeah.
because, and maybe it's like a self something I put on myself, but Milese and I both felt that the pressure on us to teach the best class
Mhm.
because she's the studio owner and I'm the
Sure.
studio manager, and we can't
Mhm.
be out there teaching these ridiculous classes, right? Everybody's going to be like, what are they doing? They don't even know. So whether it was a pressure we put on ourselves or it was an actual pressure, oh my gosh, the hardest thing every day to walk into
Mm.
that studio, teach, hear the feedback, and then let it go and just be
Yeah.
like, okay, that one's done, on to the next one.
Mhm.
And always feeling nervous and, you know, nauseous and
Yeah.
anxious about teaching. And I mean, I still feel that way. Of course, I've only been teaching for 2 years, but such a challenge to take all
Mhm.
of it in.
I mean, it still happens to me too.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that, you know, kind of what I like to talk about in the yoga practice is that you can never fully expect that everything's going to be perfect. You know,
Yeah.
but as a yogi, you kind of learn how to deal with them. So it's like, although I will always kind of have these thoughts of, oh, you know, do people like my class, or am I living up to everyone's expectations? Like, before, it would have been like I would just like jump in onto that dialogue and that drama and like participate with it. But, you know, I like to give like a metaphor. I heard this from someone, I can't maybe it was Gwen, I don't know who it was, but Gwen has a lot of great metaphors. So it's like, as the yogi, you sit in the eye of the storm and you observe all of these swirling winds of
Mhm.
like what sometimes seem chaos, or just our life around you, and you have to maintain balance. So, you know, you can never expect that the winds will stop, sure,
Mhm.
but you can never expect that, you know, you're going to be enlightened and perfect,
Right.
and that everyone, you know, you won't ever deal with that in your classes or the way that you think, but you learn how to, like, you know, uh, approach those thoughts with a sense
Mhm.
of, you know, cultivating that seat of the observer.
Well, and I think, you know, as a yoga teacher, if you're not practicing, I mean, you're not going to maintain that balance.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong?
Oh, it's true. Being practicing yoga is essential.
It's essential.
It keeps you inspired. You know, you keep learning. Like,
Mhm.
it's first and foremost, you have to be a student.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so, you know, this is off topic, but not really. I was just reading a post, something on social media from one of my friends who's in the motorcycle industry. There's a problem with the motorcycle industry right now. That's the industry that I'm in, which is we're not getting new riders, right? And there's
I could be a new rider.
it's a little stale. And his suggestion was, you know, all you people in, you know, in the top brass on all these companies, go get on a motorcycle.
Yeah. You got to
Like,
ride the bike.
go get on a motorcycle, go get the
Right.
wind in your face
Mm.
and see what happens,
It's
because
the
that's where you're going to
same.
get inspired.
It's
you
not
But
off
know?
make sure you
topic
wear
at
a
all.
helmet.
Yeah,
wear a
for
helmet.
sure. Yeah.
It's the same thing. I mean, how do
Yeah.
you write about motorcycles and talk about them?
Yeah, you can,
and if
unless
you're
you
not
ride,
riding
unless you
them,
ride them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
the same. You got to
Yep.
take a ride on your yoga mat.
Yep, for sure.
And it's hard to, you know, as a teacher who's like, you know, you have to make a living, like, especially as I'm now
Right.
moving to San Francisco, which is
Yeah.
very expensive. You know, it's hard to like teach a lot of yoga classes and then take yoga
And
or
then
do
take-
so. You know, cultivating your own home practice is super
Mhm, it's
essential, because like
important.
otherwise, you know, I don't want to do, you know, 35 yoga classes a week.
Mhm.
I mean, like, that's a
Whoa.
lot.
Right.
That, like, I mean, I have to do some other things. So like, just going home, you know, and like rolling out my yoga mat and, you know, doing some breathing, doing a few
Mhm.
sun salutations. I also see, like, you know, you have a really established home practice.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, you know,
there's
from
some
the videos
opportunity
that
there.
you post.
I do. You know, I've my home practice kind of ebbs and flows, but it's something that I'm continually committed to, and it's always so therapeutic for me to step on my mat at home and just move my body the way I want to move and not be told how to move, which don't get me wrong, I love to be told what
Yeah.
to do. That's why I go to yoga class. But yeah, I mean, there's seasons of it for sure.
And it's also a demonstration to your family, right? I mean,
Yeah, the
like,
kids
hey,
get
this works.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, like this is not, I don't just talk about this. Like, this is what I
Right.
do. This isn't just my work. This isn't just like how I make a living, but it's
Yes.
actually like a part of my life.
Something that I love and is
Yeah.
very essential to
Which
my
is so
my health.
odd, right? I mean, there's just not that many people that get to do something that they love every day.
It's true.
So,
Right?
yeah, so you know,
It's true.
you make some compromises being a yoga teacher,
You
but
do.
Yeah.
but you also
Probably
like,
not
you
gonna
were
be a
probably a
millionaire.
yoga teacher because, well, I don't know, I might be.
Okay,
Jack
yeah.
might be.
No,
The
I'm joking.
Jack
No, it's
Workman
kind of
yoga.
sad. Like, no matter, even if I'm like the biggest yoga teacher in the entire world, I'll probably never be a millionaire.
You'll spend it all on coffee.
I'll spend it all on Dutch Bros.
Dutch Brothers
Sponsor me.
Plug Dutch Brothers.
But I forgot what I was gonna say.
Well, let's bring
Let-
it
let-
like
let-
kind of.
Let's read a couple comments real
Yeah,
quick.
let's read a
Okay.
couple comments. Sure.
so the
what
o-
Ken said.
So let's see here. We've got, so Amanda was on here, Hofer. And she said, I have to hop off soon, but I'd like Jack to give advice to young men who are resistant to diving into a yoga practice.
So
Where would
Amanda
you
has a
recommend they
son.
start? And are there retreats for teenagers to be immersed in yoga? These are a lot of questions. Do you see yourself leading a retreat like this? Ooh, there's your millionaire opportunity.
Maybe.
I love it. Do you think you could use this opportunity as a mentor to touch on how hard it is to feel comfortable in your own skin and how you were able to overcome this to live your truth and sing your song? I love your beautiful soul. Thank you. And then hearts from Amanda.
Oh, well,
and
thanks,
then
Amanda.
Chanel, is that Channel?
you.
Chanel, I'm
Chanel.
assuming. You're a true gem. I have so much love and respect for
Oh, my
you.
lord.
There's Julia. Love you, Jack. My favorite. So yeah.
Well, you know, just to go back to Amanda's questions. You know, it's funny because I think that it's really wonderful to have like teen yoga experiences, but for me, I would not be like as into it as if I didn't just go to a normal yoga class.
Yeah.
Like the
totally.
thing is, like,
no, I hear you.
it has to be like yoga. You know, I would just take, you know, whoever take young people to yoga. Yoga should be like a space for young people, you know, to learn that, like, you know, you have to learn what it is to be in a yoga class. You can't just like, you know, do whatever you want. You have to be in the space and
There's
do
a
the yoga.
discipline there.
Yeah.
There's a discipline which is really valuable, which was valuable for me. But you know, I think that studios and classes should welcome that kind of thing too.
Yeah.
They sponsored our baseball team last year. We had a bunch of baseball players in there.
Oh,
They were
that's
12 years
cool.
old. Yeah.
That's
My
cool.
son went last night.
Yeah, he did.
And it's, you know, I think that you've got it, but like my daughter doesn't want to have anything to do with it. She's just like,
Yeah,
not
you
my
have
thing.
to find
not
yoga,
my thing.
you
And
know?
it's, you know, if it's not your thing, like
You have
it's
to,
not your thing.
Yeah, you got to
you
allow
know?
people
It's like
to
piano
find
for
it.
you.
And yoga
know?
will come to your life in different times. You know,
Yep.
it doesn't have to like you know. I think people think it's really special, and it is really special that I found yoga at such a young age. But it doesn't. You know, you
Doesn't
could
have to
find
be that way.
yoga. I actually have a student in San Francisco who comes to my class now, who has been coming to my classes, and he's like 85 years old.
Nice.
And he had said, he was telling me he's never been active, you know, he's never like done
Wow.
any physical things. And then he came to yoga and he like just felt so fulfilled from it, you know. And it's really special that he found yoga, you know, at that age. And it's like it was good that it came to him at that point. That's when he needed
when it was supposed to arrive.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, you know, to Amanda's questions, kind of wondering how a young man at that kind of time in your life can feel more comfortable in your own skin. Yoga can certainly provide that for you. There's also other ways to get through that, but how did the yoga briefly provide that for you? Was it the physical aspect of it, or was it that mind body connection, or
Well, I think it was all of the things, you
Mhm.
know, it was the community. It was being able to relate to people that I was around.
Mm-hmm.
It was the physical practice, like having a lot of fun, you know, doing putting yourself into anything, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and really dedicating yourself to it. That's
Sure.
really fulfilling experience, you know. So that was yoga was that thing for me. But you know, and it just happened. Yoga happens to also be a thing that encourages like your own self observation at
Mhm.
the same thing. But I think honestly, like doing art, photography, like riding motorcycles
Sure.
is like it's like a yoga practice in a way. Like being able to get really skillful at something is like
Mhm.
a way to come into your own embodiment.
Yeah.
But doing something. Like
And
that's the big
yeah.
that's the biggest
Mhm.
thing, you
and
know, like
connecting with people who love to do that
to do
also.
whatever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When like you said, whether it's photography or writing or whatever, instead of just like playing Fortnite.
This is actually yeah. This goes into a really important point. I listened to the Bhagavad Gita on audiobook at night because it's my all
you do.
favorite yogic text. And it it says something like, and I was like, I'm gonna memorize this quote and say it tomorrow. That's what of course I don't remember.
And now you
Rewind,
don't know.
rewind.
But it's like to be in the okay, dharma is like your purpose, your own moral purpose of why you're here on earth.
Okay.
So to like be your purpose in life is to find your dharma and then to live your dharma.
Mhm.
That is why you're here. So don't live in the dharma of someone else or will be in suffering, but find what you do, find what you love, and then just do it fully.
That's
you know?
such good advice.
Yes.
Thank
that
you,
is-
Bhagavad
That
Gita.
is
Thank
that
you.
is great advice.
Could you just come like speak at the head of my bed every night and like
I'll read you a little
lull
bit.
me to sleep with your Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah.
Aw. So
you should listen to it on audiobook, everyone.
I should because
who's the
Eknarth. I forgot his last name. Just look up Bhagavad Gita and Eknarth on like audiobooks on Kindle or
Okay.
something like that.
Cool.
it's another really heady text, but it approaches a lot of the problems we have in life today with
Very cool.
you
It's
know
it's my favorite.
it's
yeah.
a really good one.
Nice.
So let's just bring ourselves to present really quick
Mm.
because I think something that is really cool to note is Jack tells his story and Jason Crandall is a very instrumental part of this whole story. You trained with him, you met him at Yoga Journal. Now you are now teaching at the same studio
Mhm.
as him.
Yeah, watch out, Jason. I'm coming for your job. No,
Do
well,
you really want it?
it's been a really amazing experience to go to San Francisco and, you know, to begin to teach in these spaces that, you know, that not just Jason started that, but like a lot of the teachers that I've respect fully
Mm-hmm.
started at these spaces. So, you know, and just kind of coming into my own teacher, you know, like realizing that there are eventually times in your process where you know yoga requires that you're not always just hearing the words of your teacher, but eventually you become your own teacher. And I think that's really happened
Yeah.
you know in a lot of ways with me as I'm getting you know as I'm getting older.
Well, I mean, you've been through a lot too, and
Yeah.
Jack, you lost
Yeah, so that was just actually
Not
like
that long
like
ago,
a year ago,
which seems so crazy.
to this week or last week.
Yeah, and Jack's dad was really deep in the yoga community here and really well respected and
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean that was obviously you know we haven't mentioned that yet, but
I
it was
know.
also a pretty instrumental part of like when I was talking about how coming out wasn't really in my like the forefront of on my plate. You know, it wasn't the biggest thing anymore. You know, it's been dealing with like the grief of my dad passing, and um, but you know, it's always like a practice. You know, and my dad. He was so wonderful about you know he was a really great teacher for me too, being gentle and kind. And, you know, I think a lot of that which I embody comes up from him. You
Yeah.
know, so you know, going to San Francisco, having you know that experience of you know my dad passing and also being a very you know intense experience. You know, being with him while he was in hospice, like every moment
Wow.
by his side. you know, to now like feeling, you know, like I am like, oh, I'm out in the, I finally feel like I'm like out in the world now. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, now here's my voice. Here's what I offer.
That's so neat.
And
I
you have a
love it.
mentor, it sounds like, too, in
Mm.
Jason.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so many mentors
Mhm.
actually, you
Yeah.
know, and Jason is definitely a big one of them. And, you know, even my dad still is a mentor for me in the
That's
ways
cool.
that like he communicated his way to me, which I, you know, am coming into more and more, which I'm happy about.
That's so
Really
neat.
cool. Well, that was an amazing conversation.
Yeah, it really
That
was.
was really fun, and really insightful. There's several things that I'm going to have to remember and write
Ken's gonna have
down
a
now.
list.
Yeah, Bhagavad Gita,
Books.
Patanjali's 108.
Yeah, yeah. There's like a whole list of Googling things now and Amazon. But we really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been really wonderful.
If people were in San Francisco and they wanted to take a class from you, where would they go?
Oh, well, I teach at a lot of places.
Oh, okay.
And so the best thing that you could do is go to my website
Oh,
at
okay.
jackworkmanyoga.com.
Nice.
Yes.
There
And
we
you can
go.
see my full schedule. And you can also follow me on, I'm like going to just take this plug.
No,
Do it.
that's
Um,
it. Do it.
That's the
and then you
idea.
can follow me on Instagram, which you can also find from my website. And that's where I post a lot of, you know, fun yoga stuff, yoga posts that talk about, you know, Dharma talks. Also, you know, like just joking around and giggling because that's a very big part of what I like to do through yoga.
What is your Instagram handle?
It's also Jack Workman Yoga.
Okay.
So at
awesome.
Jack Workman
that's,
Yoga.
That's easy to
That is
remember.
my name.
Jack is the real deal, guys.
Oh, well,
He's,
thanks.
you know, everything that you see and hear is true, and we love him and miss you. But I'm so happy to see you out doing what you love.
Well, so happy to be here. So
Yeah, thanks.
thanks for having me.
Thank you.